This is at 4x, and I put this up here at 4x because here you can start to get a sense of where the different tunics are. Okay, so for every slide, you want to be able to identify the 4 major tunics. Again, I won't ask you for the different parts of the tunics except for the epithelia. You should always be aware of the epithelia. And then you want to say, what are the adaptations that are allowing you to know that it's this particular organ? So this is the esophagus. So what you want to do is find the lumen first. And the lumen is going to be where the epithelia is. So this would be the lumen here. And obviously when food goes down the esophagus, this would stretch out and become nice and big, right? But when there's no food there, it kind of collapses on itself. So this part right here would be the mucosal tunic. All of this right here. And then you go submucosa, which is going to be, again, mostly connective tissue. So it's going to generally stain a bit lighter. So the mucosa will usually stain a little bit darker because those epithelial cells being packed close together are going to have a darker staining than submucosa. And then you go into muscularis externa. Actually, let me go over this direction. So this would be mucosa, this would be submucosa, and then muscularis externa. And then out here, the very outer part would be the serosa. Okay? So if we magnify this so we can start to see what's going on, I take it up to 10x. Now you can see what kind of epithelia is here in the mucosal tunic. And this is stratified squamish, because you can see many layers here. The cells are kind of squished. So that's letting you know that you're in the esophagus. The only other place this could be would be the anus, and you'll see that the anus is going to look very different from this. So this is helping you to know that you're in the esophagus. Again, this is the mucosal tunic right here. Down here would be submucosa, and then out here would be your muscularis externa. And I'll just... So this is your muscularis externa out here. So you have a circular layer and then a longitudinal layer cells. Different layers. And then all the way out here is your serosa. So I think for this one, it's, 10x is a really good magnification to look at. I really see the need to go up to 40x. I think 4x or 10x would be good for this one. Okay, so that's the esophagus. So I'm going to then switch over to the stomach. Now for the stomach, what you want to look for is you want to look for the gastric pits. And that's how you're going to know that you're looking at the stomach. And unfortunately, these stomach slides are pretty light. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to project. But this would be at 4x. And again, you want to find your lumen. So I'm going to go towards where the epithelia is. So if you look out here, this is definitely not epithelia. Okay? Over here, this is your epithelia. Okay? You can see that really nice dark stained basement membrane that's going around like that. So you know that this is your epithelia, so this is your lumen over here. So that means that this is your mucosal tunic right here. And then it goes lighter, so this would be your submucosa. And this is actually even really nice for the mucosal tunic. Again, I'm not going to ask you to identify these different layers, but you can see them really nicely on this. You can see the epithelia of the mucosal tunic. And again, that dark area, that's the basement membrane of your epithelial cells. So you can see that real nicely. And then under here, this is the lamina propria of your mucosal tunic. And then you can see the Muscularis mucosa of the mucosal tunic right there. So that one just has them stained really nicely. But again, all I'm going to ask you for is to know that this is the mucosal tunic. Then you go submucosa here, and you can see that it's stained much lighter. And again, that's because it's mostly connective tissue in there. And then you come over to your Muscularis externa. And here you have 3 different layers of muscle cells. You'll have an oblique layer, a circular layer, and then a longitudinal layer. And then out here is your serosa. Okay. So those are your different tunics. Now what we want to do is we want to come in here and we want to magnify this so we can see it a little bit better. And again, when I look at that, I know that I'm looking at stomach because I can see that those are pits. So what I'm looking for here is this indentation right there, that's your pit. That's a pit, that's a pit, 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 pit. And then at the base of those pits, you can see your gastric glands. And again, when we magnify that, you should be able to see them a little bit better. But all of those indentations there, those are your pits. So we just magnify that. So it would be nice if they were actually at the top, but you kind of have to kind of look this way. So again, this is the lumen. This is where all the food's going, and then all these juices are coming. You've got all these different compounds being released, like pepsinogen, HCl, acidic mucus. All of that's being produced and released from these gastric glands down here. See all these little gastric glands down here. And then they're going to travel up through these pits and then into the lumen. So you should start to be able to see that this is simple columnar epithelia coming around like this. And if we magnify this even a little bit more, you should see that the nuclei are all sitting over here towards the basal surface. And that's helping you to know that these are pits. Some people get confused and they say, why isn't that a villi right there, right? And it's kind of, you have to get used to looking at it where this would be the surface, this would be the surface, and these are the pits coming down off of the surface, instead of this being the surface, and these are the villi sticking up off of it. That's confusing for some people. But when you look at villi, which we'll look at later, you'll see that in the middle here of the villi, you're going to see blood vessels and lacteals. And here there's just connective tissue in here. So you know that those are not villi. And again, if you look, you'll see that the nuclei are running like this. So this would be the apical surface, and that would make that a pit right there. And then again, you can also look and see at the base of these pits, you should see little gastric glands, which you do. So I'm just going to magnify that. So this is 10x, and take it up to 100x. Now you should be able to start to see this better. So these are all your simple columnar epithelial cells. So they're going like this, and the nuclei are all down here. And this right here would be your pit. So again, kind of if the stomach were a flat surface, if the mucosa were flat, it would be like this. But you have these invaginations, these pits down here. And you can see in the middle here, this is just connective tissue of where this layer of epithelia and this part of the epithelia are just connecting to this lamina propria right here, that connective tissue. And then at the base, I'll pull this up and you should be able to see gastric glands down here. So all these like circular areas here, these are the glands. So all these kind of circular spots, those are the glands at the base of these pits. So that's how you know you're looking at stomach. You're looking for those gastric glands and gastric pits. So now I'm going to go to the small intestine and show you what the villi look like. And the slide that I like is a composite slide where it shows you the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum as 3 separate slices so that you can see the different parts and be able to identify one versus the other. So at 4X here, again, what you first want to do is figure out where your tunics are. So you look down here versus here. This is where your epithelia is. And again, it's curving around like this. So this would be your lumen. And from here down here, this would be your mucosal tunic. Then you've got the submucosa here, and again, you should see that this is staining much lighter than this area. So mucosal tunic, submucosa, and then down here you can really nicely see muscularis externa. You can see your circular and then longitudinal layer of smooth muscle cells. And then way out here, just covering all this, would be your serosa. So this should be real nice to see the different tunics. Serosa, very thin out here. A lot of it gets torn away when you prep these tissues. Muscularis externa, 2 different layers of smooth muscle cells. Submucosa, mostly connective tissue, and then mucosal tunic. Now these guys right here, these are your villi that are sticking up. Those should look different to you than the pits did. And in the middle of these villi, that's where you're going to find blood vessels and lacteals in the middle here. So these should look nice and distinctive as finger-like projections, where the others that we looked at should really look like pits, indentations, instead of projections. Now what we want to do before we magnify it is we just want to say, can we tell the difference between the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum? And what you're looking for in the duodenum, you're looking for Brunner's glands. In the jejunum, you're not going to see either Brunner's nor Peyer's patches. And in the ileum, you'll see Peyer's patches. So if we look at the duodenum first, so here you can see the villi are they're really extended, sticking out really far. So I'm cutting off some of the villi just to get all this in. But these would be the villi up here, these guys sticking out. Okay. And then this would be the submucosa. And you can see in the submucosa a whole bunch of glands, and those are your Brunner's glands. So the Brunner's glands are here in the submucosa. And then here's the muscularis externa, circular longitudinal layer. So this tells you that you're looking at the duodenum because you see these glands. These glands are producing alkaline mucus that's going to go out here into the lumen and neutralize that acidic kind coming from the stomach. Then if I go over to the ileum, so this is the ileum, and again out here these would be our villi, and this would be the mucosal tunic, and And then we go submucosa, muscularis externa, serosa. And you can see here in the ileum, in the submucosa, in this part here, you can see these great big patches of lymphoid material. These are nodules. This is basically what your tonsils look like. It's just a whole bunch of lymphocytes. And that's letting you know that you're in the ileum. You cannot miss those Peyer's patches. They're huge. They should really stand out. So this is telling you that you're in the ileum. So that way, in case any bacteria came from the large intestine up here to the small intestine, we don't want those bacteria to be able to get into the bloodstream here in these villi. And so these lymphoid nodules are going to be able to help to target those pathogens. Now, if we look at the jejunum, okay, so here's the jejunum. So again, you've got these really nice villi sticking out. You've got your mucosal tunic is all this. Here's your submucosa. Here's your muscularis externa. And you can see here in the submucosa, you don't have Brunner's glands and you don't have Peyer's patches. So you're in the jejunum. And so just look at that one more time, and let me show you Brunner's glands one more time. So this is the duodenum, and these are your Brunner's glands. You see they're big clumps of glands right at the base of the mucosal tunic. So if we magnify this, we go over to the jejunum here. And if we take this up to 4x, and you can see these villi here. These are simple columnar epithelial cells, right, coming out like this, and then going around this. And here in the middle would be blood vessels and lacteals. So this is simple columnar epithelia, like this. You can see the nuclei here. It's all around like that. So those should look like real distinct finger-like projections. And you can see down here, these are called intestinal crypts, and they're secreting intestinal juice. You'll also see those in the submucosa. And in the small intestine, you have these really long intestinal crypts. So between these really long intestinal crypts and these really distinct finger-like projections, should be pretty clear that that's small intestine that you're looking at. So if we go to the colon then, so one really distinctive thing about the colon is that in the colon, embedded in the epithelia, you're going to see lots and lots and lots of goblet cells, cells that secrete mucus. Now you can see goblet cells all along the GI tract. You can see them in the esophagus, in the stomach, in the small intestine, but you see lots of them in the colon. And that always helps me to tell I'm looking at the colon. So first of all, what you're looking at is, this would be the lumen here. This is your epithelia, and we'll magnify this in a minute. This is your mucosal tunic right here. You can even see your muscularis mucosa of your mucosal tunic. This would be the submucosa. It's pretty small here, the submucosa. And then down here is your muscularis externa. And in the muscularis externa, you have what are called tenicoli, these three bands of longitudinal smooth muscle cells. But anyway, you don't need to worry about that in terms of this. But then the outside here would be the serosa. Now, when you look in here in the mucosal tunic, all these little like kind of spaces that you see, these little, they almost look like clear circles. Those are your goblet cells filled with mucus. And if you think about the colon, it makes sense that you're going to secrete a lot of mucus because you are absorbing the last little bit of water here in the colon, and you're producing the feces, and you need to move that feces. So it makes sense that you're going to produce a lot of mucus to help move the feces in a forward direction. So if we just magnify this here. So you can see the simple cuboidal epithelia is going like this, going around like that. And then you see all these circles, those are goblet cells embedded in the simple cuboidal epithelia. And again, all those goblet cells are going to secrete mucus. So that's how I know that I'm looking at the colon, is I don't see any villi, I don't see any pits. I see simple columnar epithelial cells, and all embedded within it are these goblet cells all over the place. And then if we go over to the rectal anal juncture. So what you're looking for here is you want to go to where the mucosal tunic is. And here you want to look for the division between the rectum and the anus. And the way you're going to know that division is you're going to look for simple columnar epithelia, and then it's going to change into stratified squamous epithelia. That's where the juncture is. And you can see that that happens right here. So when we magnify this, you're going to see that this is stratified squamous right here, and that is in the anus. And then over here, this is simple columnar epithelia, coming like this, and dipping around like that. And then you can see down here you've got intestinal, they're basically kind of like those intestinal crypts that we saw earlier. They're producing mucus and fluid, these guys. But this would be the rectum, and then right there, the anus. So I'm just going to magnify that. Literally where the junction is right here. This is stratified squamous right here, and then over here this is simple columnar, and you can see these great big goblet cells in there as well. So I'm going to turn it down so you can see. Yeah. So again, this right here is stratified squamous, and then here simple columnar with goblet cells embedded in it. So here's simple columnar coming like this. And we're just going to follow that with goblet cells embedded in it. And the last one is the pancreas. You guys should be familiar with this already. Pancreas, you can see right here, that would be your islets, your pancreatic islets. They stain lighter. All of these other cells here would be your acinar cells or your acini cells, the ones that are making the exocrine products or the digestive enzymes. These circles here, these would be the smaller pancreatic ducts. that will eventually all converge into the major pancreatic duct that drains into the small intestine. These guys are blood vessels here, small blood vessels, these lines. We don't have the kidney up. We'll talk about that on Tuesday once we talk about the kidney. There's only one slide to the urinary system, so it'll be pretty easy, but it doesn't make sense to talk about it now because I will be using lots of terms that you're not familiar with. So, any questions on this histology? Again, the main thing is look at it several times and really get a feel for pits versus villi and how to see your different tunics.